Hey guys, welcome back. I hope you are having an amazing day. Let's get right into the stories. The first one is a pro-revenge story. I started working at a hospital data center in the network operations group back in 2018. Our job was to sit in a room 24/7 next to the servers, making sure nothing caught fire, monitoring alerts, and doing routine tasks like swapping out tape backups. It was pretty simple work, really. This was supposed to be a tech job, but some people had been there for decades, dating back to when you had to change printer paper and run commands from an IBM mainframe. The specialized hardware and software made it difficult to apply skills elsewhere, so it had become a dead-end job. Because some people weren't tech-savvy at all, we weren't given much responsibility. You can't tell some people they can log into a server, and others not, so we were reduced to the lowest common denominator. We were a network operations center where nobody was allowed to interact with any network equipment. Speaking of lowest common denominator, let me introduce you to my new supervisor, Deborah. Not her real name, but definitely her real spirit. She'd been there for over 20 years and got the job solely based on seniority. Deborah was a sociopathic narcissist and one of the most unpleasant people I've ever encountered. Shortly after I was hired, our hospital was acquired by another and we combined data centers. Deborah was demoted to shift lead and had to work with us in the 24/7 rotation. She was terrible at her job, and our responsibilities diminished to very little. We had no agency to fix any problems on our own because it had to be a problem that Deborah could solve, and Deborah was both lazy and incompetent. After a couple of years, I was promoted. On my first day after they announced the promotion, Deborah walked up to me and said, "You know you're going to fail, right?" I was taken aback. "Excuse me?" I replied. She smirked. "You heard me. You don't have what it takes. I've seen people like you come and go." I tried to keep my cool. "Well, I appreciate your opinion, Deborah, but I intend to prove you wrong." She just laughed and walked away. Despite her attitude, Deborah had a powerful tool at her disposal: the hospital bureaucracy. Since the place was unionized, the hospital had a just cause firing policy instead of an at-will policy, even for non-unionized employees. This is generally a good thing, but it created ridiculous situations where it was nearly impossible to lose your job unless you were really egregious about it with repeated violations or showed up drunk or high. We had someone steal computer equipment and they kept their job. It was nuts, and Deborah had been there for nearly 30 years, so she wasn't getting fired without a lot of work. That's okay, I thought. She was terrible at her job. One of the most important things about our role was monitoring for alerts. When an alert popped up, we had to go through a specific procedure to ensure some data went through. If we didn't do this, a nurse wouldn't get their lab results back. In one case, an alert came in, Deborah saw it, then decided to keep browsing the web. Because of this, a patient from the cardiac ICU was going into surgery, and the doctors and nurses operating on the patient couldn't get a white blood cell count, I think. I'm not a doctor, I just work in a building with a lot of them. It was something very dangerous for this patient, and tragically, the patient died. This still did not get Deborah fired. I confronted her about it later. "Deborah, do you realize what happened because you ignored that alert?" She shrugged. "Not my problem. The doctors should have been more prepared." I was stunned. "A patient died, Deborah. How can you be so callous?" She just rolled her eyes and went back to her phone. The reasoning from HR, "Well, it didn't directly lead to harm." I'm generally pro-worker, but some jobs you just absolutely have to do. I was furious. She had to go. I kept a paper trail of everything she messed up on. It wasn't nitpicky. We're talking literal life and death stuff here. Verbal warning, first written warning, second written warning, final written warning, termination. It was a slog, and I'd rather spend my time doing anything else, but that's the way it went. Then Deborah figured out she could work the system. As she approached work Armageddon, termination, she would tell HR she was being harassed. The person harassing her was different every time, which would trigger a mandatory investigation. This investigation took about 6 months, they wouldn't find anything, and we would carry on. Except these warnings, they had a 6-month expiration, so she could always reset the clock when it got close. Everyone was helpless. Even the CIO couldn't do anything about it because of the bureaucracy. Deborah was a menace, and the entire IT department had to interact with the data center staff, which meant interacting with her, and she was universally disliked. And she had 20 years until retirement, and she would outlast the heat death of the universe. Then I had an idea. What if, under the guise of developing skills relevant to the 21st century, we required everyone working in the Network Operations Center to pass the Net Plus exam? It's not a difficult exam, but it's not trivially easy. I felt pretty sure that everyone on the team fell above the line between able to pass and not able to pass except Deborah. We would give everyone better titles, a significant pay raise, and entrust them to do more with the equipment, which is something everyone desperately wanted. Then people could actually leave the hospital with transferable skills and do something else if they wanted and not feel trapped. I spent 3 years in meetings with HR, with my director, with the CIO, with HR again. Job description meetings that took 6 hours to tweak small wording, hundreds of hours in meetings, red tape hell, absolute red tape hell. Do you have any idea what it takes to approve a significant raise in a bureaucratic muck factory like that? But the raises were crucial because it would absolutely not be fair to ask this of them. Pass a test or lose your job without a large carrot attached would lead to mutiny. And then it got approved. I also wrote the exam requirement into my own job description. It was important to still be able to do the job and not let my skills lapse just because I was promoted. Also, this meant I could cover for people when they were on vacation or sick. Plus, I also got that sweet, sweet pay bump. It went over well. I was nervous, but the plan made sense, and I was able to communicate that. People would be more marketable. The job would be more interesting, and most importantly, they would be making 20% more than they were before. And I think it really helped that I also gave myself the same requirement when I absolutely could have chosen not to. The hospital would pay for off-site training. They would still get paid their full hourly during the training, including shift differential for second and third shifts. We paid for all the materials. I scheduled 8 hours a week for people to go someplace quiet and study. The job itself had a ton of downtime so people could study, but this was formally carved out time anyway. We paid for the exam, and if they failed, we'd pay for the second attempt. We were given 8 months to pass the test, so this is how it was for the 8 months. I did not want Deborah to have any excuse whatsoever and somehow convince HR that this process was rushed or unfair. Everyone passed on the first attempt except Deborah. Deborah did not pass her second or her third attempt, a bonus attempt. Deborah, being the classic narcissist, thought this was somehow all about her, that this was a vast conspiracy engineered over multiple years and hundreds of hours just to get rid of her, and she would tell everyone within earshot that's what was going on. "You can't do this to me," she screamed at me one day. "I know what you're up to." I tried to reason with her. "Deborah, this is a requirement for everyone. We're all taking the exam. But you know I can't pass it. You're trying to force me out." I sighed. "We're providing training in multiple attempts. Everyone else has managed to pass. Maybe if you focused on studying instead of complaining, you'd have better luck." She stormed off, muttering about conspiracies. "Yeah, okay, Deborah. You realize how insane that sounds, right? Not everything is about you, sheesh. Well, okay, in this case it is, but still. Only I, and 2 other people, know that." I remember the exact time and date we told her she was being let go. It was 2:37 p.m. on March 15th, 2023. She was in such deep denial that it could ever happen. She thought she was bulletproof. I don't think I will ever achieve anything more satisfying in my career. I'm not usually one to take satisfaction in seeing someone's livelihood go, but she was uniquely awful. She was a patient danger, and it had been nearly 5 years of working with her by this point, and I was just so sick and tired of her nonsense. I was a hero the day after she was fired. I went to the main office for a meeting, and people were congratulating me like I just had a kid or won a marathon or something. Even the CIO. They were just happy for me that I didn't have to supervise Deborah anymore. But in my head canon, they were congratulating me for pulling off this elaborate plan. Morale back at the data center was also high. We learned interesting things. A couple of my coworkers left for better gigs elsewhere. The ones who were content staying were able to stay, and we all had more money and job security. And because anything could set off a bullshit Deborah harassment complaint, people were stressed out working with her. Her being gone was like a breath of fresh air. Newcomers were told stories of Deborah, and they seemed exaggerated. They were not. In order to solve a very important and extremely difficult problem, I pulled off a vast workplace conspiracy that improved the lives of the people I worked with in addition to keeping our patients safe. Getting Deborah fired is my greatest and most difficult accomplishment, and I can't put it on a CV anywhere. The next one is an entitled people's story. I never thought I'd be in a battle with my neighbors over an orchard, but here I am. My name's Tom, and I inherited this beautiful 5-acre property from my grandparents a few years back. It's got a cozy farmhouse and a thriving apple orchard that's been in our family for generations. I was so excited to carry on the tradition and maybe even expand the business a bit. Everything was going great until the fancy new housing development went up next door about a year ago. Don't get me wrong, I've got nothing against progress, but these weren't just any new neighbors. They came with their very own HOA, and boy did they have plans. It started innocently enough. A couple of the residents would stop by to buy apples or chat over the fence. They'd go on and on about how lucky I was to have such a beautiful orchard. I'd smile and nod, proud of my family's legacy. But then one day I noticed something odd. There was a trail of wood chips winding through my orchard. I followed it and found it led straight from the new development to the lake on the other side of my property. I was confused at first, thinking maybe some kids had made a shortcut, but this looked too well planned for that. I decided to ask around. That's when I met Karen, the HOA president. She was all smiles as she explained their community improvement project. "Oh, Tom, isn't it wonderful? We've created a nature walk for all the residents to enjoy. It goes right through your lovely orchard to the lake. Everyone's so excited about it." I must have looked as shocked as I felt because her smile faltered a bit. "Is something wrong?" she asked, her voice sickly sweet. "Karen," I said, trying to keep my cool. "That's my private property. You can't just build a walkway through it without asking me." Her smile disappeared completely. "Now, Tom, don't be difficult. This is for the good of the community. Your orchard is so beautiful it would be selfish to keep it all to yourself." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Selfish? It's my land. I run a business here. I can't have people wandering through whenever they want." Karen's eyes narrowed. "We'll see about that," she said before storming off. I thought that was the end of it. I was wrong. The next day, I woke up to find a crew of workers in my orchard, actually paving the wood chip trail. I ran out in my pajamas, yelling for them to stop. "We have permits," the foreman said, shoving some papers in my face. I snatched them and looked them over. Sure enough, they had permits for the HOA's property. But this wasn't their land. I called the police, but by the time they arrived, the crew had packed up and left. The officer looked over the situation and shook his head. "Looks like a civil matter to me," he said. "You'll need to take this up with a lawyer." Great, just what I needed. Legal fees on top of everything else. I decided to take matters into my own hands. That night, I went out and put up a fence across both ends of the new path. I made sure it was sturdy and added no trespassing signs for good measure. The next morning, I was woken up by angry shouting. I looked out my window to see a group of residents, led by Karen, of course, gathered at the edge of my property. "Tom, remove this fence immediately," Karen screeched. I walked out to meet them, coffee in hand. "Good morning, neighbors. Is there a problem?" Karen's face was red with anger. "You know very well what the problem is. You've blocked our community path." "You mean the illegal path you built through my private property without my permission?" "Yeah, I did block that." One of the other residents, a guy in an expensive-looking jogging outfit, stepped forward. "Listen, buddy, we paid good money for homes with lake access. You can't just cut us off like this." I took a sip of my coffee. "Actually, I can. This is my land. You want lake access? Use the public beach half a mile down the road like everyone else." Karen pulled out her phone. "That's it, I'm calling our lawyer. You'll be sorry you messed with us, Tom." I just shrugged and went back inside. I had work to do in the orchard after all. A week later, I was served with lawsuit papers. The HOA was suing me for blocking an easement and disrupting community activities. I'll admit I was scared. These people had money and probably fancy lawyers. All I had was my orchard and a stubborn streak a mile wide. But I wasn't about to give up. I took the papers to a local lawyer, Bill, who'd helped my grandpa with some property issues years ago. He looked them over and actually chuckled. "Tom, my boy," he said, "these folks don't have a leg to stand on. There's no easement on record for your property. They built that path illegally, plain and simple." I felt a wave of relief. "So what do we do?" Bill grinned. "We countersue. Trespassing, destruction of property, filing false permits. We've got a laundry list of charges we can throw at them." And that's exactly what we did. The day we showed up in court, Karen and her HOA cronies looked so smug. But as soon as our countersuit was presented, I saw the blood drain from their faces. The judge was not amused by their antics. He pored over the property records, the falsified permits, and the photos of the damage to my orchard. When he finally spoke, his voice was stern. "This is one of the most blatant violations of property rights I've seen in my career," he said. "The HOA had no right to construct anything on Mr. Thompson's land. The path will be removed immediately at the HOA's expense. Furthermore, the HOA will pay for any damages to Mr. Thompson's orchard and business. I couldn't help but smile as Karen's jaw dropped, but the judge wasn't finished. Additionally, I'm ordering an investigation into the HOA's practices and the falsified permits. There may be criminal charges pending. As we left the courthouse, Bill patted me on the back. "Well done, Tom. Your grandpa would be proud." I nodded, feeling a mix of relief and satisfaction. "Thanks, Bill. I couldn't have done it without you." The aftermath was pretty satisfying. The HOA had to pay for the removal of the path and the restoration of my orchard. They also had to cover all my legal fees. Karen resigned as HOA president in disgrace, and I heard she moved away a few months later. Some of the nicer neighbors came by to apologize. They hadn't realized what the HOA was up to and felt terrible about the whole thing. I accepted their apologies and even invited them to my annual apple picking event. These days, things are pretty quiet. My orchard is thriving, and I've even expanded the business a bit, just like I'd planned. Sometimes I see people from the development walking down the road to the public beach. They wave, I wave back. No hard feelings. I learned a lot from this whole experience. Mainly that it pays to know your rights and stand up for them, even when it seems like you're outgunned. And of course, to always be wary of HOAs bearing gifts. Oh, and if you're ever in the area, stop by for some apples. Just use the front gate like everyone else, okay? The next one is a petty revenge story. In the early 2000s, my mates and I were in a bar on a weekend. Somehow a guy starts acting up and slapped my friend on the cheek. My friend didn't respond violently, but walked away and then came up with a plan. We went outside and my friend steps in a giant wet dog poop on the street and walks on his heel back into the bar while making sure the poop is in its entirety and still hanging onto the underneath of his shoe. Then my other friend walk up to the guy, hit his baseball cap so it falls to the floor behind him. My friend with the poop quickly steps on the hat and yank his foot around while the guy is getting angry at the first guy for hitting his hat. My friend apologizes to him and he angrily picks up his hat, and without noticing that it's covered in dog poop, he placed it on his head and we are all quickly out of there. I wonder how his night went and if he got up close to some people, or girls, who would find him disgusting for smelling horrible. We were bad. The next one is a malicious compliance story. In my first job, I worked in IT as an access and permissions administrator at a large company with significant technological debt. The environment included custom software dating back to the Windows 9X and even DOS era. Initially, the work was quite tedious, involving a lot of back-and-forth communication between multiple departments. We had to ensure that each employee had the necessary training and documentation to access data in the scope requested by their manager. Additionally, we needed approval from the manager of the department related to the system role in question. On top of that, the company's excessive paper-only bureaucratic workflow made the work go at a snail's pace. A single SAP account for a blue-collar worker required at least 3 forms signed by different people. The heads of departments responsible for signing those papers didn't feel any urgency to send them to us quickly. A good example of this is when I, myself, waited over 2 weeks after being hired in the IT department before my first account was set up. Until then, I only had a guest account that allowed me to access the main internal website with the company's procedures, regulations, and other basic information. Up to this point, each signed form had to be physically delivered to us, which was agonizingly slow given that the company had multiple branches. We decided to automate away the paperwork. Our first step was to allow the use of scanned documents. It was a partial success. While it eliminated the courier delays, management still required us to sign the physical copies afterward, which we mass stamped at the end of each month. The next step was to introduce a fully electronic workflow. We faced significant resistance from upper management, so we had to settle on a system that mostly replicated the existing paper processes. Despite this, it was a game changer. We created presets that managers could select and customize as needed, using data from these customizations to create better-fitting presets. We also developed workflows that automatically generated and assigned subtickets for necessary approvals and tracked how long it took, sending reminders if needed. And finally, we got an approval from HR to access layoff data to generate user block removal tickets. Sometime after we rolled out the new system, the HR payroll manager made a big fuss. She was furious that her team was still waiting weeks to get their permissions and questioned whether all our work had been for nothing. That really struck a chord with me. Inside, I was overjoyed, but I did my best to keep a neutral expression. At that time, we were working on summary reports with burn down and bottleneck charts, and I already knew that tickets requesting HR payroll access were spending over most of their lifespan waiting for her or one of her sub-managers to approve them. The manager immediately went on the defensive, claiming she couldn't keep up with the amount of tickets. She then requested a change. She wanted any request from her employee to be automatically approved within the relevant scope of their sub-department. For example, a request for an HR worker to have full HR access and limited payroll access would be automatically approved for HR access but not for payroll, and vice versa. I was skeptical but weren't exactly in a position to argue. I asked my boss to join the discussion and explained that the goal was to prevent overly permissive approvals that could lead to unauthorized access. I tried to convince her to brainstorm together potential edge cases before making a blanket approval, but she was already set on her decision and wasn't interested in discussing details. My boss shrugged and said it would be her responsibility. He told her to write up an official document outlining the change, and we would proceed with the implementation. The only request we had was to include a line that each such request would still be created, assigned to as normal, and marked as automatically approved by name of the main HR payroll manager, decision. I uploaded the scan into our system and, anticipating that it would eventually backfire, made a photocopy to keep it handy in the top drawer of my desk. The original copy went to the archive. A few weeks later, she stormed into our room. The speed with which she flung open the door made it clear she was furious. She demanded to know why we had granted full access to payroll data to her subordinate. I think it was the only time I ever heard anyone yell in the company. I calmly reminded her of her request to automatically approve in-department access requests. She wasn't having it, explaining that one of her low-ranking subordinates from the payroll sub-department had accessed the salaries of everyone in their department, including managers, and was unhappy with the paycheck disparity. Isn't that obvious that they shouldn't be able to do that? Well, yeah, to a human, but that decision was automated away by your request. I handed her a copy of the document she had signed, which instructed us to automatically approve any and all such tickets without exception. Immediately afterwards, she asked us to roll back the change while she wrote up another document to cancel the previous one. In the following days, she meticulously reviewed all those tickets and requested us to reduce access for several users. I have to admit, she did a thorough job and kept up a good pace in reviewing new requests, doing it daily instead of once every week or two as before. In the end, we managed to distill a subset of permissions that could be approved automatically and proceeded to implement a similar approach with other departments. The next one is an entitled people's story. It's been 3 blissful years since I married the love of my life, Rich, and together we embarked on the journey of homeownership. Our cozy abode became our sanctuary, a place where we nurtured our dreams and built a life together. The only shadow looming over our happiness was my mother-in-law, Karen, who harbored deep-rooted prejudices against me. Her disapproval stemmed from my humble African-American background, as my parents had worked tirelessly to provide for our family despite their meager means. Karen's disdain for me was evident from the beginning, as she openly declared that I wasn't worthy of her precious son. Despite this animosity, I always strived to maintain harmony in the family, not wanting to create unnecessary conflict or force Rich to choose sides. Regrettably, Karen didn't reciprocate my efforts and frequently ignited confrontations. Driven by compassion, we offered Karen a temporary stay in our home when she faced financial difficulties. The early days seemed uneventful, but subtle signs of intrusion began to surface. Personal belongings went missing or were tampered with, and a sense of violation infiltrated our sanctuary. Trusting my intuition, I confronted Karen about her behavior, but she vehemently denied any wrongdoing. In a shocking turn of events, she even resorted to calling the authorities, falsely accusing me of a crime. Although the police found no evidence against me, Karen's sinister actions persisted. One fateful day, I discovered a slashed tire on my car, a calculated attempt to sabotage my routine and jeopardize my job. Undeterred by her malevolence, I managed to rectify the situation swiftly and salvage my employment. It was apparent that Karen's efforts were aimed at driving a wedge between Rich and me, despite the fact that our love thrived independently of our work situations. Her relentless assault on my life continued when she gained access to my phone and manipulated it to disrupt my daily routine. Disguised as me, she sent a resignation message to my boss, attempting to dismantle my professional stability. Grateful for my understanding employer who saw through the deception, I resolved to protect my personal boundaries and prevent Karen from wreaking further havoc. With unwavering love and determination, Rich and I confronted the toxic influence Karen wielded over our lives. Recognizing the urgency, Rich spoke to his mother, urging her to find employment and become self-reliant. Unfortunately, Karen stubbornly resisted his pleas, leaving us with no choice but to provide her with additional time under our roof. To offer respite from the mounting tension, Rich and I planned a much-needed getaway to a picturesque lakeside cabin. Surrounded by serenity, we reveled in each other's company, hoping that this break would motivate Karen to reassess her choices. Energized by nature's beauty, we returned home, eager to reclaim our haven. However, as we attempted to unlock our front door, the keys no longer fit, sending chills down our spines. Bewildered, I questioned whether Karen had altered the locks, an act that defied logic and common decency. Knocking on our own door, Karen appeared, greeting Rich warmly while pointedly ignoring my presence. Shockingly, she declared that monkeys like me were not welcome in our own home and encouraged Rich to divorce me. Fueled by a righteous anger, Rich vehemently pushed past Karen and stormed inside, demanding answers. Determined not to be cast aside, I followed him, prompting Karen to erupt into a frenzied fit of rage. Dialing emergency services, she summoned the police, fabricating a narrative that painted me as an intruder. Fortunately, one of the responding officers had been a former co-worker, and their presence offered a glimmer of hope. Realizing the gravity of the situation, the police swiftly uncovered Karen's deceptive machinations. They questioned her about changing the locks while we were away, and she denied any involvement despite our inability to enter the house. Concern turned to horror when, driven by madness, Karen launched a vicious attack, brandishing a hammer she had used in her misdeeds. With a swift response, the officers subdued Karen, restraining her and ensuring our safety. Bound by love and an unyielding commitment to justice, Rich and I resolved to press charges against Karen, even though she was his own mother. Her betrayal had reached unforgivable heights, and the consequences of her actions could no longer be ignored. As the truth emerged, we discovered Karen had intentionally deceived us, hiding a substantial amount of savings while exploiting our compassion. Her calculated plan had aimed to dismantle our marriage, using our own kindness against us. Yet despite her relentless efforts, she had failed. Love had triumphed over hate, and Karen would now face the consequences of her deceitful and malicious actions. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Alright, so this is my first post to this sub because this is the first time I have a worthwhile story. I also apologize for the formatting. Please bear with me. My father told me this story at my granddad's wake. Some backstory about my granddad. He grew up in Depression-era Virginia and slaved away in the coal mines in order to make ends meet. His only way out was to join the Marine Corps, so he did. He fought in Korea and left the Corps soon after the war ended. He then somehow managed to get a job as a high school football coach in a county in SEW, Virginia, despite no prior experience. This was fortuitous, since he happened to have a knack for it. He went on to coach for 35 years at the same school, racking up hundreds of games and a good win-to-loss ratio, while burning through wives and fighting Gamecocks on the side, making a pretty penny at this as well. His career was going pretty good until they merged the school he was coaching at with one from a neighboring town. Due to the merger, there was only room for one head coach at this new super school, and the choice was between my granddad, who had 35 years of experience and by now almost 1,000 games to his name, and a guy with a poor win-loss record and only 150 games to his credit. Obviously, the school board chose the inexperienced guy. My granddad complained to the school district about this terrible, terrible decision, and in response, they relieved him of all coaching duties and shoved him into teaching an 8th grade health science class. Now bear in mind, they did this to a man who had fought communists in Korea, had 3 teeth drilled out without anesthesia, fought Gamecocks, and always managed to charm the cops into leaving him alone, and had survived working in coal mines in the 1940s. By now, the man had no ducks to give. My dad, at the time, was the starting quarterback for the school's football team, so he witnessed the ensuing battle firsthand. My granddad decided that he didn't want to teach 8th grade health science and decided to make the school board suffer. The man never got sick and never took a day off in his entire career, so he had quite a few leave days saved up. He decided to take them all at once. For the entire first semester, he only showed up to class on Mondays. The district brought suit against him, but when the case went up in front of a judge, he looked at what they had done to provoke my granddad and promptly told them to duck off. So for the next year and a half, my granddad only taught his classes once a week and cost the school board tens of thousands of dollars in substitute teacher fees, all the while fighting gamecocks and talking his way out of trouble in his newfound free time, in addition to getting full sick pay. He nearly single-handedly bankrupted the entire district for pissing him off. Finally, halfway through the next school year, the district offered him his old job back. He politely declined, tendered his resignation, and almost immediately got snatched up by a district in the next county over. 0 ducks given. I miss this man. The next one is a petty revenge story. This year, I got a new job that has been paying me very well. Therefore, for this Christmas, I decided to splurge on everyone. In particular, I spent a lot of my money on my 9-year-old daughter, and she deserves it 100%. She has been pushing herself in school, helping around the house without being asked, and always being the kindest soul you'll ever meet. However, when my mother-in-law came early in the morning and saw that the gifts under our tree were much more than usual, she asked why. I told her I bought everyone a bunch of gifts, including her. She then proceeded to ask how many gifts I got my daughter, and I told her about 3 big gifts and 3 mini ones. Apparently this outraged her because she started saying that a 9-year-old did not deserve that many gifts and she would be taking away the gift she bought my daughter so that my daughter wouldn't be too spoiled. I told her that was unfair, especially since my mother-in-law promised my daughter a doll for Christmas, and my daughter was looking forward to it. My mother-in-law said, "Let it be a lesson to my daughter that in life she can't get all the things she asks for. Look, I understand that, but it's not like I shower my daughter in gifts every day, and if anything, Christmas is the day you are supposed to spoil your children, but my wife told me to let it go, and it was her mother's gift so she could do anything she wanted with it, and her mother agreed, saying it was her right. And if we were going to play with that ideology, then so be it." I decided to remove the $600 a designer bag I got my mother-in-law, the thing I knew she wanted the most, and gave her a $40 robe instead. Once my mother-in-law opened her present, she was disappointed and asked if that was all from me, because everyone else got increasingly more expensive gifts from me. And I said yes, and apologized if I disappointed her, but we can't always get the gifts we hoped for. This left both her and my wife extremely furious. But, hey, the mother-in-law got enough gifts. I wouldn't want to spoil her. The next one is a petty revenge story. I used to work in a call center where everyone had little cubicles. You could chat with people on either side or behind you if things got slow, but anyone on the other side of the divider was sort of hard to see or chat with. This is only important because Karen was in this hard-to-see location from me. I have issues with overheating, medical stuff. I like to sit right under the AC vent. Nobody fought me for this because it was a little too cold for most people. Well, being a woman, this meant that sometimes I had some nipple protrusion issues on some days. It's perfectly natural, and to most people not noticeable because it was under my shirt and bra. Karen noticed this and made a report to HR. The HR woman and my direct supervisor paraded me through the cubicles and into their office to question me about my nipples. Now, I could have thrown a fit about this to begin with since we didn't actually have a dress code, and it's none of their damn business. They asked me to prove I was wearing a bra, so I showed them the straps. They told me, good enough, basically, and asked me to go back to my desk. I refused to go back. I said I needed to file a complaint about someone. They asked me who I was reporting. I said, I don't know, but you do. I want to report whoever it was that's been staring at my breasts all day. Now that I know someone is staring, I feel like this is a hostile work environment. They acted like I was joking at first until I said, if you don't have a talk with them, I will go over your heads and report you for forcing me to reveal my bra to you. I got escorted back to my desk and Karen was sitting there looking smug until they escorted her to the HR office instead. I don't know what happened to her in the office, and I didn't care. They did their part by having their talk with her. All I really wanted was to know who did it. Since it was a very slow day, all my coworkers started asking me what that was all about. Office gossip, you know? I told everyone exactly what had happened and added that Karen must be fascinated with my breasts, since she noticed. Everyone else confirmed they didn't even notice. When she came back from HR, every person in the room knew what she had done and was glaring at her. Snitches didn't get stitches, and didn't get fired either. But they got treated like the Karen they were. Nobody would talk to her. People would be chatting, see her come try to join the conversation, and go silent and turn away from her. Some people did loud whispers and made comments like, "Shh, don't say anything, she will report you." She quit about 2 weeks later. The next one is an entitled People story. In the past, I've made posts about my jerk of a brother, but this time something else happened. I decided to go camping again for the first time this year because of spring break. Though I only got the weekend to go, it was just enough for me to unwind. My brother didn't follow me like he used to. I think I've finally gotten him to understand that screwing with me is just not worth it anymore after he drank that growler full of laxative-spiked beer he stole from me last year. So the drama from him hasn't been as bad for the past few months, though he's still an entitled jerk, and I've got plenty of things to tell about him and his antics from the months I wasn't posting. I figured my worries about camping trouble were over. But no, I had to deal with a lunatic Karen. I'd already spent one night at my campsite. I was loving the fresh air, and fortunately rain was minimal. That's the only reason I went. Otherwise I would have just stayed home, but I had an itch to scratch to get out and enjoy some mountain air. I was far from alone as the spaces around me were full of tents, trailers, and RVs. Plenty of people caught the camping bug during spring break, just like I did. I was sitting relaxed in a folding lawn chair and watching Tailspin on my portable DVD player. Yeah, I know it's a cartoon, and an old one at that. But I enjoy it since as a kid, I used to watch some old tapes of it a cousin had, and I've owned the DVDs of the complete series for around 10 years. And I won't deny I've always had a bit of a crush on the character Rebecca Cunningham. I had headphones on because other campers were playing music, barbecuing, and doing other things. I was just chilling and letting myself mentally zone out with some refreshing cold beer when I got a sudden and hard tap on my shoulder that frankly scared the piss out of me for a second. And then I turned around to see a roughly middle-aged woman in over-tight purple yoga pants with her hands on her hips. She didn't have the Karen haircut, but she did have the bleach blonde hair and overly large bug-eye sunglasses. I know in this situation a lot of people will reflexively say, "Can I help you?" But that's just giving an opening to these people to say whatever they want. So my first reaction is to just angrily say, "What? Can't you see I'm trying to relax by myself?" That set her aback for a second. She didn't go away, so I paused the episode I was on and grumpily asked her what she was bothering me about. She spoke up in a matter-of-fact way that sounded like she was trying to be in charge. I guess trying to activate mom mode on a stranger, but I think the unfriendly scowl on my face was enough to show that I'm not exactly friendly. So she just pointed at the portable DVD player and said that she wanted to borrow it and the headphones for her daughter. To make it brief, I said no. And no is a complete sentence because I don't know her. I don't know if she'd bring it back, and I certainly don't know if her kid wouldn't damage it. I do actually keep a smaller backup portable DVD player in the camper too, but I wasn't about to let this woman know that. Well, she certainly didn't take being told off like that well, and then launched into a tirade about how I was a grown man watching cartoons, how they only have one TV in their RV, and her daughter needs something to watch because her kids can't agree on what to watch, so she needs my DVD player. I coldly said that was not happening, and she actually gave me a loud, "Why not?" So I pointed out to her that this was really not my problem, and she just crossed her arms and said that, as an adult, I should be putting kids first. I said that would be the case if I had kids, but her kids are not my kids. I don't know them, and I'm in no way related to them, and therefore I have no obligation to them. So she rolled her eyes and then tried to offer me money for the headphones and DVD player. Admittedly, I didn't pay much for either of them, but I don't care. I wasn't interested in selling. She only offered $20 for both anyway. I just told her no and to kindly leave me alone to watch movies in peace. Then I tried to just sit back down and resume the episode. She didn't take that well and proceeded to try and grab my DVD player right in front of me. Like I was just going to let her walk off with it. I got up and stopped her while saying, "That ain't yours, lady?" She proceeded to try and shove me over. Try being the word. She clearly underestimated how heavy I am. I don't look it at all, but I'm around 230 pounds. My body frame just hides it well. and I've been in a few brawls in my life. I ended up grabbing her arms and shoving her back with little effort. She fell on her bum into some wet grass and started yelling that I'd assaulted her while looking around for support. I've seen enough Karen stories to know where this goes if I say nothing, so I yelled, "Yeah, assault! Assault on me when you tried to push me over and steal my stuff. And there are plenty of witnesses around us, lady. Or did you not notice?" There had already been a few people around us watching the whole altercation, and they'd gone dead quiet while staring. So then I said to everyone, "Check it out. We've got a bona fide Karen here who tried to take my stuff for her precious angel baby. Everybody clap for her." And they did. They actually started clapping. The Karen looked completely humiliated and stormed off screeching that I was an a-hole. Her yoga pants ass was all wet from the grass too, which only made it funnier. I kept thinking, "Your ass is grass," as she walked away, but I didn't say it aloud. I tried to resume watching the DVD as I was, but I felt uneasy the Karen might come back. She snuck up on me rather easily before, and I didn't want to risk that again. So I packed up and went back into my camper to continue watching and drinking inside. Got pretty plastered that night. I remember giggling like a moron while watching the episode with the panda people that were evil Chinese stereotypes. Stayed at the campsite for one more night and didn't see the Karen again until I was leaving Sunday afternoon. I saw her standing by her POS-looking RV with a large fountain beverage in one hand and a dog leash in the other. It was one of those yappy little fluffball dogs too. She glared at me as I drove past, and I just waved to her and said, "Bye, Karen," out my window. She threw her drink at my truck, but none of it got in through the window. I could hear her yelling at me, but couldn't really make out a word of it. I'm not sure what goes on in the heads of these people. I understand this could have gotten a lot worse, like that nut bar sicking the local ranger on me or something, but I think the public humiliation was enough to make her back off. I can only wonder if the rest of her family is just like her. Glad I didn't meet them. The next one is an entitled parent story. So, I am a 14-year-old male and my family recently moved into a house in a new estate. This estate has a massive park. My house is on the main road of the estate, and its garage is on the other side, along another road, and we are close to the park. About 2 months ago, they hosted an opening ceremony for the park. A lot of people came, including people from the surrounding areas. My brother, my parents, and I left our house and walked down to the park. Due to all the traffic, there were people managing it. Once we got there, we saw a car parked in our driveway. My dad is usually a calm dude, but he doesn't like stuff like this. My brother, 18 years old, and I went up to one of the workers and told him that the car in the driveway wasn't ours and we didn't want it there. The worker told us he saw the people parked there and kind of remembered what they looked like. We told him that it would be good if we could get the car moved. He said he would try to find her. About 20 minutes later, we saw him walking up to the car with a lady and her son, who looked to be about 9. She walked up there, and we saw her starting to get angry. Naturally, we walked up to see what was happening. This is the conversation that happened. Not 100% accurate. It's been a while. Karen: "I don't understand why you want me to move my car. I live here." Worker: "Well, they say that you don't, and I don't see why they would bring this issue here unless it was true." Karen: "They are clearly lying. I live here." My brother: "Ma'am, please. I live here and I even have keys to the house. Please move your car." Karen: "Bullcrap, complete bullcrap. I have lived here for a year and watched this park get built. Our house was finished 5 months prior to this." My brother: "Okay then, what 2 cars are inside the garage then?" Karen: "A Volkswagen and a Mazda." My brother: "Nope, a VW Jetta and a Hyundai i45. Karen: "That's not true. I'll open the garage and show you." As she scuffles through her handbag, my brother opens the garage. My brother: "There, that's the evidence." Closes the garage. Worker: "It's not your house, so please leave." She gets in the car and leaves while looking very angry. We didn't think to call the cops because nothing major happened, but it was funny to see her lying out of her ass and getting proven wrong. The next one is an entitled people's story. I consider myself a true car enthusiast, and one of my most cherished possessions was my beloved 1969 Chevrolet Corvette. It took me years of dedication and a significant amount of money to restore her to her former glory. Unlike some collectors who keep their cars locked away, I preferred to drive mine and share its beauty with the world. Every time I took her out for a spin, I received countless compliments and sparked engaging conversations. Little did I know that my story wouldn't be about the joy of owning a classic car, but rather the ordeal I faced with my vindictive homeowner association president. Living in a non-optional homeowner association neighborhood meant I had to abide by their rules, even if I didn't choose to be a part of it. From the moment I fixed up cars and proudly drove my vintage beauty, the homeowner association president held a grudge against me. He despised my passion and took issue with the fact that my car added character to the neighborhood. Numerous times he confronted me, complaining about the noise and how my presence made the whole area look messy. I brushed off his comments, knowing he couldn't do much to stop me. After all, I was working on my car during reasonable hours, and had the right to use my property as I saw fit. One fateful day, the situation reached its boiling point when the homeowner association president knocked on my door. Bleary-eyed and still in need of my morning coffee, I greeted him with confusion. Me hello? Homeowner association. President, I'm here to inform you about a new rule regarding parked cars in our neighborhood. His smug grin betrayed his satisfaction, while I remained oblivious to the new rule's details. Me. Okay, thank you for letting me know. Homeowner association. President, the new rule states that all dilapidated and unsightly cars are not allowed to be parked on the streets. They give our neighborhood a shabby appearance, discouraging visitors from coming. Me. Why didn't this information come through the monthly letter? The one I typically ignored and discarded as junk mail. Homeowner association. President, I thought it was important to personally inform you so you can avoid having your car towed by putting it in your garage. Suddenly it dawned on me that this rule was concocted solely to force my car off the street. My car, though old, was in impeccable condition, and I had no intention of moving it. It took me longer than it should have to understand his malicious intentions, but at least I caught on before he left. Me. My car doesn't fall into that category, so I won't be moving it. In fact, my car is worth more than yours, so perhaps you should worry about keeping your cheap piece of junk off the street before it gets towed. With that, I firmly closed the door and retreated inside, needing to cool down after the infuriating encounter. Let me clarify. I have no qualms with people driving inexpensive cars. Every vehicle has its merits. However, I knew that particular dig would irk him, and I couldn't resist the opportunity to get under his skin. Little did I know this altercation was far from over. While I peacefully slept that night, the homeowner association president orchestrated a devious plan to bend the rules in his favor. He had secretly called a tow truck company, falsely claiming that my car violated the homeowner association rules and needed to be impounded. Although I didn't know the exact details of what he said, I was certain it bore no resemblance to reality, since no legitimate tow company would consider my well-maintained car as beat up or abandoned. When I discovered my car was missing, I wasted no time and headed straight to the homeowner association president's house, determined to locate my stolen possession. I intended to sue him, but first, I needed to retrieve my car. To my dismay, he informed me that I had to file a motion through the homeowner association, and only then would they disclose the location where my car had been taken. Although he could have easily provided the information, I reluctantly went through the lengthy process. After 4 agonizing days, I finally learned the tragic fate of my beloved Corvette. To my horror, it was too late. When I arrived at the scrapyard to reclaim my car, I discovered that it had already been crushed. My heart sank as a surge of emotions overwhelmed me. The pride and joy I had poured my heart and soul into had been stolen from me, obliterated before its time. It wasn't merely impounded. The homeowner association president had gone to the extent of hiring a towing company specialized in scrapping broken vehicles. My sorrow transformed into seething anger, directing every ounce of it towards the person responsible for this irreparable loss. As I had already planned, I proceeded with legal action, enlisting the help of a lawyer who recognized the magnitude of the injustice. We discussed the compensation I could potentially receive, taking into account the car's estimated value. I had conducted thorough research and knew my car could have fetched around $50,000 in its pristine condition. Since it was irreplaceable, the homeowner association would also have to pay an additional amount to account for the loss of the unique product they had destroyed. Moreover, my lawyer believed we had a case against the entire homeowner association for the illegal removal of my vehicle. Fueled by a thirst for justice, I sought vengeance even as we entered the courtroom. My anger remained unwavering. Fortunately, luck was on my side, as the judge assigned to the case happened to be a fellow car enthusiast. However, the path to justice was far from straightforward, and I braced myself for the legal battle that lay ahead. The judge, acknowledging his expertise in automotive matters, delved into the intricacies of the case. The homeowner association faced serious repercussions for towing my car based solely on its appearance, violating their own rules. Furthermore, they had failed to ensure the car was taken to an appropriate impound lot, as opposed to a scrapyard. The judge recognized the true value of my classic car, agreeing that it had been irreparably damaged and was now worth $50,000. The weight of this loss loomed over me. No amount of money could fill the void left by my cherished Corvette. Nevertheless, the homeowner association had to be held accountable for their actions. In the end, the judgment was in my favor. The homeowner association was ordered to pay a total of $75,000 in compensation for their grave misconduct. Some might consider this a victory, but deep inside, I would have given back every penny to have my car restored to its former glory. The homeowner association president, burdened by the financial consequences of his actions, announced his resignation from the position. Though no one explicitly admitted it, it was clear that the rest of the board had pushed him out due to the exorbitant amount of money he had cost them. The next one is a pro-revenge story. Wife and I were sitting on our stoop and hanging out with the kitten outside after a long day at work, 8 p.m. The kitty is playing in the snow nearby, at the edge of our driveway, which connects to the road. Out of nowhere, a Ford pickup speeds by and swerves into our driveway, narrowly missing a very scared kitty. A skinny younger guy jumps out of the driver's side and urgently walks toward the stoop, his back to the road, and starts to fiddle with his zipper. No way, man. He hasn't seen us sitting there, it's dark out. So I shout, hoping he won't whip it out right there and urinate at us. I think he may be a friend of our neighbors at first. They are pretty trashy. Me, hey man, who the hell are you? You need to slow the hell down. A-hole. Oh, hey. He continues to unzip, and his pathetic wang is spurting dribbles of urine in our direction. I notice he is swaying awkwardly. Probably drunk, I think. Me. Look, mother ducker, kids live here. You can't just expose yourself. Now get the duck out before I call the cops. A-hole. Good, call him, I don't care. Wife. Fine. I don't have anything better to do, ATM. Wife dials the non-emergency number to the station, which is less than 100 yards down the road, and puts it on speaker so A-hole can hear we aren't bluffing. Somehow, after what feels like an eternity, the dude is finally finishing up and holsters his private part. On the phone, wife tells the police that some guy sped into our driveway, barely missed our kitten, and is exposing himself while probably drunk. A hole. Good, tell them my plate number is wrong plate number. He slurs and stands there defiantly with his belt open and hanging limp. I walk a few steps so I can see his real plate number and read it aloud to my wife. At this point, the guy seems to slowly realize that this is really happening, and with his pants unbuckled, he waddles quickly back to the driver's side and peels off down the road, swerving in the snow. My wife is still speaking to the police operator when a badass police charger absolutely roars by, presumably in response to our call. She ends the call and we resume our night, kind of chuckling it off while reassuring our little kitten. The next day we call back to see if anything came of it in the end. Turns out they got him just down the road. DUI, underage possession of alcohol, indecent exposure in a school zone, and reckless driving. We caught all the audio on our front door camera and forwarded it to the officer in charge. They say it may help add more charges and strengthen others. Good luck, a-hole with no license, fines out the ass, and being a registered sex offender for life. The morale is, if someone warns you to move along, you better do it. Also, don't drive drunk, people. The next one is a petty revenge story. About 4 years ago, I used to live in a nice homeowners association in a small town in Texas, and enjoyed having only one neighbor over my backyard fence. The plot was about 2 acres, and the other side of the backyard butted up to a hayfield. The stars were beautiful at night because of virtually no light pollution. However, my neighbor decided to install an incredibly bright security light over their back porch aimed right at my back patio and bedroom windows. I tried to ignore it at first and put shades in the bedroom, but on the patio, it was like having a bright LED headlight in your face all night. I consulted the homeowner association about adding a privacy addition to my fence to increase its height, and they said no because it's already at the 8-foot maximum allowed height. They said there was nothing in the bylaws or whatever about bright lights, so there was nothing they could do. Diplomacy. So I hated for this to be the thing where we finally had a formal greeting after 3 years of back porch waves, but I walked over and rang the doorbell with $20. I politely explained how the light was causing the aforementioned nuisance and asked if there was any way I could convince him to point the light down or in a different direction. I even offered to buy him a case of beer, the $20, out of goodwill, and even a new motion-sensing light. He seemed nice and agreed to point it down, but after waiting a month, nothing changed. I went back to have another polite conversation, and he said he had changed his mind and was going to leave it on every night and leave it pointed as is. Petty revenge. Needless to say, I was a bit upset that diplomacy failed, and I started figuring out how to win. If the military taught me anything, there are always ways to adapt and overcome, so I started researching fast-growing plants to create big privacy walls and reading through the homeowner association, bylaws, and city-state ordinances to find out what I could or couldn't plant and if there were any repercussions for encroachment across the property line. I quickly discovered that running bamboo, despite being very invasive, would grow super fast and make the neighbor's house and light disappear from view. There was nothing in the homeowner association/state/city books to prevent me from planting it, or cause legal recourse if it spread and grew on his side of the fence. The only thing he could do is cut anything that grew on his side of the line. So I pulled the trigger and planted a bunch of golden bamboo, which grows and spreads crazy fast in Texas and grows up to 20 feet tall. I didn't care if it took over the fence line because his house is 15 feet from the fence while mine was 50 yards away. So I planted a bunch right against the fence and only put a root barrier on my side to prevent it from spreading into my yard. Within 6 months, his house and light were gone from view, replaced by a pretty bamboo jungle row at the edge of my yard. Within 1 year, he complained that it was growing into his yard via mailed letters, but they went right into the trash with no response. He rang my doorbell once, and I looked at him through the window but just didn't answer the door. I unexpectedly sold the house and moved 2 years after planting for a career opportunity. It's been 2 years since I sold, and I just checked the property on Google Earth, and his entire backyard is bamboo. The next one is an entitled people story. I am 26 years old, and I decided to open my own business this year. Moving forward in this post, I should point out that I'm from a small town, 1,000 people, in the rural Midwest. Because of this, everyone has some sort of connection with someone. We went to one of the liquor stores in the closest city 30-ish minutes away, small city 8,000 people. When we were grabbing some alcohol for a party, I was looking at the prices and saw how insane the prices were. For a 6-pack of a local beer, we were charged $15. I was thinking about this and figured that I could probably make bank opening a liquor store. Back in February, I was furious about my crappy job and thinking out loud how cool it would be to own my own business to a friend. My friend's mom happened to be the president of the local bank. He told me, "Hey, with the pandemic, the bank has been struggling to find customers to give out loans. Right now, the bank is giving loans for cheap." A couple of weeks later, I went in and met with my friend's mom and pitched my idea with the research I had done on alcohol prices, potential demand, and estimated income. I got the loan at a fantastic interest rate. I bought a building, which happened to be the former bank, and hired my dad to help me renovate the building. My dad is a general contractor, and he gave me an excellent quote on materials and labor. After working everything out with the distributors, getting the proper licenses, and getting my paperwork I needed for the government, I was ready to open my liquor store in May. I had started taking out ads in the local newspaper advertising my store and my prices. When I was in talks with my distributors, I learned, even with inflation and everything else, the liquor stores in the city had like an 80% markup. I talked to a local business owner, and he suggested that I have around a 35% to 40% markup. Because of this, I was significantly cheaper than the closest liquor store, and had a much wider selection than the gas stations and small local stores nearby. My hometown is near a national forest. As such, we have a ton of people who come up for weekends for recreational activities year-round. My first week, the week before Memorial Weekend after opening, I had made a $4,000 profit. It was great being my own boss. If someone was rude to me or my girlfriend, "Oh, I'm sorry, you can do your business elsewhere." If someone tells my GF, "Go back to China, you chink idiot," they can pay me 15% more at the register. Did the gang and I run out of alcohol? Time to grab my keys, not car keys, the store keys. My apartment is like 2 blocks away, and go to the store. That's not to say that it wasn't difficult running my own business, especially that my only employee was my GF, and we were both working 6 or 7, 10 to 12-hour days a week. I was both manager, accountant, and cashier, but duck, it's so much nicer knowing I can tell someone to pound sand for being a prick. Couple of weeks after Memorial Day, some old guy walks into my store a couple of minutes after I opened. He seemed friendly enough, but eventually he offered to buy my store. I'm not going to say the amount, but it wouldn't have even covered my principal on the loan. I rejected the proposal outright and refused to negotiate the sum higher. He walked out of my store saying, "Welp, you'll be sorry you rejected that offer." The next month, a guy walked into my store and asked if I was the owner. After saying yes, I was informed that my business was being sued by this random guy I never heard of for libel. After he left, I was freaking out and I decided that I was going to close early. When I got home, I Googled the guy and soon saw a picture of the guy that tried to buy my store. It turns out that that is the guy who owns both of the liquor stores in the nearby city. It also just so happens that he is on city council. With a little bit of further digging, I learned that this city has an ordinance that reads, "Any business institution that does not fulfill the definition of a restaurant, tavern, or liquor dispensary will be excluded from obtaining a license for the sale of alcohol." Later, I discovered that the same guy happens to be the head of the board, which approves liquor licenses. I love small-town corruption. Either way, I had a major issue. My maternal uncle happens to be a lawyer in a neighboring state. I decided to call him and try to get some legal advice. I talked to him and read the documents that I had been handed/served over the phone, and the research I had done. After receiving all of the information I had read off, I was expecting to get some sort of advice, but instead heard, "Hang on, I got to make a call," and he hung up. I'm freaking out. I was actually about to post my first post to our legal advice. I'll be honest, I just wanted someone to tell me it was going to be okay, and I didn't need to crawl to this guy on my hands and knees. As I was writing the title, my uncle called back. "Hey, OP, I just got off the phone with my partner. He agreed that we can take your case pro bono. If you would like to accept, we can discuss at my office tomorrow at 1 o'clock. This is how I learned that my uncle is on the bar in 3 states. So we meet, and we discuss the case. It turns out that the guy filed the libel suit against my business based on the ads I took out in the local newspapers. He claimed that my ads were targeted to damage his and his business's reputation. There were a few other things that I had no idea what was being referenced, but Uncle assured me that we would win this case no problem. 3 weeks later, the case is dismissed, but after my uncle says people like that piece of work will likely try to file another suit against you. If that happens, call me and promise I will help. The next day, I get served again, but this time I am the defendant. Not my store, me. I swear to God, I look at the documentation, and the only thing that changed was instead of my business's name, mine is listed as the defendant. Same thing happens, 4 weeks later the case is dismissed. Over the next 3 months I was sued just as many times. Before the 5th case's hearing, we had a settlement meeting. My uncle, the judge, the guy suing me, his lawyer, a bailiff, and I were sitting in this room. Judge says, "You two have been in court 4 times already. Is there any way we could come to an agreement that'll stop this cycle of faulty litigation?" The guy's lawyer says they have an offer and hand it to my uncle, who then hands it to me. It essentially read that he'll stop all litigation if I sell my business for about 30% of remaining loan principal. I outright rejected the offer and made a counteroffer. I said, "If you drop this case, I won't sue your ass for harassment." He busts out laughing. "Sue me? With what money? The legal fees alone ought to have drained you. You should be happy I chose to extend this offer and not sue your ass into bankruptcy and buy that shithole from the bank when the foreclose on your dumb ass." The judge, the bailiff, and the guy's own lawyer were all looking at him aghast for saying the silent part out loud about the real reason I was getting sued. My uncle straight out said to him, "Oh, I am sorry, apparently you were never told. I have taken all of my nephew's cases pro bono. The only money he has spent on your litigations is gas. And bluntly, sir, I think your outburst has just ensured a suit against you." After that, we just left, and I was then informed a few days later the litigation was dropped. Right now, my uncle and I are talking about the future suit against the guy. I want to sue the guy for a very high amount to try and get press attention on this guy and his sketchy actions. Although my uncle warned me that we'll need to be careful, because if we set the damages too high, it'll look like we're just being vindictive. This suit won't be pro bono, but after getting sued 5 times for free essentially, I'm not going to complain. Looking back on this, I am so thankful that my friends and family supported the entire way, especially my uncle. Without my uncle, I would have absolutely lost my business. The next one is an entitled parent story. This happened a year ago. I, 26F at the time in 2021, have only one living paternal grandmother, 90F. Growing up, I tried to bond with her and form an emotional connection, but it turned out that we were not related by blood. I would often be compared to her favorite grandchildren. She would constantly emotionally abuse me, calling me the black sheep of the family, and telling me that I wouldn't succeed in life. This led me to consider ending my own life because she constantly demotivated me. The final straw came when my older brother, 25M, passed away. She told my grieving parents, "Another filthy soul out of this world." My brother was an innocent soul who was killed for simply eating at a fast food restaurant. I snapped at her and said, "The day of your funeral, I'll probably wear the brightest red dress I have in my closet because I will never mourn your loss. In fact, I'll celebrate when that happens." This incident occurred in 2014. Since then, at every family event, I have avoided her or pretended she doesn't exist. I have even skipped attending her birthday parties. So, last November, she got sick and wanted all her children and grandchildren to take care of her in the hospital since her favorite daughter, my aunt, 52F, and her favorite grandchildren, 33F, 31M, and 25F, couldn't do it. She said this to my dad over the phone, and I told her, "Sorry, but my grandparents died in 2004 and 2012, and I don't have any other grandparents since I am not considered a granddaughter by my last living grandparent." She started to cry, or rather, manipulate, and told me that I am her granddaughter, and that this could be a good opportunity to bond and mend our relationship. I responded, "Now I'm your granddaughter? I needed you for 26 years, but in those 26 years you emotionally broke me. I can't do it now since I study and work. And besides, there's no relationship left to save." I hung up on my father before she could say anything. I've been told that I'm a horrible human being for what I said to her, but I don't feel sorry for her at all. She dug her own grave, and now she can lie in it for all I care. That's karma for you. The next one is an entitled people's story. It seems silly to be upset over a mailbox, but I guess that some people just don't have anything else better to do. Silly me for thinking that I could try and outsmart the homeowners associations, I guess. You see, I am an art teacher for elementary kids, and I guess you could describe me as eccentric. I don't like boring, plain stuff. Normal stuff that blends in, I guess you can. I bet you're reading this and wondering why the hell I chose to live in homeowners associations then. Well, my husband has a nice paying job, much nicer than my teacher's salary, and I enjoy the area that we live in. Besides, the inside of my house is such an expression of who I am, and that is more important to me than the outside of my house. Maybe I was too entitled, thinking I could get away with a different colored mailbox. See, our old mailbox was so plain and white and boring. It had no personality to it. And well, to me, that's just not okay. So I did what any normal person would do. I decided to paint it a different color. I painted it a lightish pink color, almost had a beige tint to it. I then painted some leaves and flowers on the mailbox. Nothing too fancy, just very minimal small little paintings. I should have known better that our homeowners association's president was going to flip her lid when she saw it. In my defense, though, I did choose paint colors that were deemed acceptable. But of course, the homeowners associations always pushes the brown or black mailboxes. It was literally the next day when I found my mailbox destroyed. I was actually kind of sad. Now I knew that our homeowners association's president was pushy, aggressive, and annoying, but it never even once crossed my mind that she destroyed it. As a matter of fact, I thought maybe some hooligans broke into the neighborhood and were messing around, until I noticed that everything else in the neighborhood was sound, and my mailbox was the only one that was broken. It looked like someone had hit it with a bat or was strong enough to knock it over. It was just on the ground laying on its side. I started wondering if there was a possibility that the homeowners associations had something to do with this. They hadn't given me a warning or anything, and if the president or any of the board members got caught vandalizing property, they could definitely get in trouble. Surely they wouldn't risk that. Well, I knew I was wrong with thinking that when I replaced the mailbox, this time with no paintings, It was just a solid light pink, when I got a note at my door suggesting that I replace it with a black one or a brown one. And then my suspicions were confirmed even further when the president knocked on my door, asking to speak to me about my mailbox. Homeowners associations. President, are you aware your mailbox is not in compliance? Me. Well, actually, I checked the guidelines and it doesn't say anything about light pink. As a matter of fact, it just says no bright or bold colors. Mine is a pretty soft pink, don't you think? Homeowners associations. Everyone else on your street has a black or brown mailbox. You're breaking the rules by not complying. Me. Then write me a fine instead of breaking my mailbox and harassing me at the door. And with that, I slammed the door shut in her face. Now, I knew that she wouldn't stop there. I even considered the possibility that she would destroy my mailbox again, even though I had no proof she was the one that destroyed it in the first place. So, I asked my husband to purchase and install a security camera that could sync with our phones. And guess what? My bright idea paid off because 3 days later, I never changed the mailbox this time, I got a notification that my camera picked up motion. And sure enough, there was our beloved Homeowners Association's president, on my camera, caught, destroying my mailbox with a metal baseball bat. I was so pissed. If I was really breaking the rules, why not just fine me like every other Homeowners Association's violation? Sure, I was pissed, and it was clear that this was turning into harassment, so I decided to replace my mailbox again. I figured that she was going to destroy it again, and then I would have multiple instances caught on video of her destroying the mailbox. This way I could turn her into the police. Except the third time, she made it pretty easy because multiple neighbors witnessed what happened next and called 911. She knocked on my door a couple of days after, and it went from 0 to 100 really quick. Homeowners associations? Prez, I see that you still haven't changed your mailbox. Are you sure you want to keep playing this game? Me. No one is playing a game except for you. And it's not a game. It's harassment. Leave me alone. Like I said, if I really am breaking a rule, then you should write me a fine. But you haven't, so I'm assuming that I'm not actually breaking any rules and you just want to be a bully. Homeowners associations. Wow, you're brave. Listen, all you have to do is change your mailbox and I'll leave you alone. Me. Leave me alone now or I'll report you to the Homeowners Associations Board and the police. Can't harass people if you're behind bars. Now, I was slightly joking because I'm pretty sure it's impossible to get imprisoned for verbal harassment and vandalism. I don't know. But either way, she didn't like this. As a matter of fact, she pulled a gun on me. And no, I'm not joking. She yanked a gun out of her waistband and pointed it at me before telling me that I would regret saying those words to her. I really thought she was going to shoot me, and I was so bewildered. And over a freaking mailbox. Well, she put the gun back in her waistband before trying to run off. However, neither she nor I noticed that several of our neighbors were outside, and 2 of them were watching. One of the neighbors blocked her path while the other called the police. Of course, now she starts panicking because she realizes that she's been caught. I'm not sure if she noticed the security camera either, but this meant that not only did I have footage of her vandalizing my mailbox, but I also had footage of her pointing a gun at me. And yep, this was enough to land her 3 years in jail. She would be eligible for parole after a year, but she was forbidden to go near me or even step foot in our neighborhood. This meant that not only was she not allowed to come back into the neighborhood after she got out of jail, but it meant that she couldn't serve in the homeowners associations. And not just our homeowners associations, she couldn't serve in any homeowners associations because she had been found guilty of a crime. And to think all this because of a mailbox. The next one is a pro-revenge story. So I am not sure if this belongs in pro-revenge since it wasn't planned on my part. It kind of just fell into my lap. Feels more than petty, so here I am. For a bit of background, my next-door neighbor was a college student. She lives with our actual neighbor, her boyfriend. Typical crazy college kid, weekend parties, drinking on her patio at all hours of the night and weird hours. You know the drill. I figured she was trying to experience college life, so why not? You do you, lady. Anyway, one summer night last year, she was sitting out on her back patio with her girlfriends doing their drunk thing. I am out wrapping up some stuff with my toddler daughter. At the time, she had a medical issue going on that caused her to walk a little weird. Nothing life-altering and something that would heal with time. She did have a wobble to her, especially when running. Sometimes she would fall right over. She was out running around with the dog, and the ladies next door were waving and telling her how cute she was. All good. We go back inside, and I hand her off real quick to the husband. I want to go to the bedroom real fast to change the sheets for later bed. I hurry up. Now, to set the scene, my bedroom is the closest to the patio next door. The windows are open because it gets super hot in there, even with AC during the day, and the lights are off. I can do this by the light of the hallway, I figure. I can clearly hear what they are talking about next door. Do you see the way she was walking? What a little retard. My little retard, my little retard. Sung to the cheerful tune of My Little Pony, I guess because that was what my kid had been wearing. This was followed by sounds I suppose my neighbor felt a mentally challenged child would make, and uproarious laughter. No, you, ducking, did, not. They didn't realize anyone could hear them, but I had the lights flipped on and was at the window and shouting in record time. Stay right there, you idiots! Ducking dead silence as they realize someone heard them. I come flying down the stairs where I am intercepted by my husband, who has no idea what the screaming was about. At this point, I am so mad that I just burst out into tears when telling him. We both decide it would be better to wait to confront until tomorrow. Everyone next door is wasted, and there is no way of telling just how many people she has over. Besides, when we looked outside, it seems like they have packed it in for the night. Not long after this, we all go to bed. My husband was outside having a last smoke before sleep. Next door idiot had sent her boyfriend out to put the fire pit out. Guess she was too chicken crap to do it herself, as she usually would. My husband and he were talking. Boyfriend. That got crazy earlier, huh? Husband. Well, your girlfriend did make fun of a child. So understanding that as her parents we are upset shouldn't be too hard. Boyfriend. Ah man, you know how girls that age. My neighbor happens to date much younger women. No judgment, but it's not a defense for how they acted. Are when they are drinking. They say crap and don't mean it. All little girls are like that when drunk. Husband. I've drunk with a lot of women and have never heard of one of them making fun of a kid behind their back. A 2-year-old no less. So yeah, that excuse doesn't fly with me. Boyfriend. Look, dude, I don't want any drama. Just ducking, let it go. Husband. Sure, just let your girlfriend know we are waiting for her heartfelt apology. Boyfriend. Whatever. Needless to say, the boyfriend is going with whatever keeps getting him that sweet drunk pussy. Not a drop of compassion, even though he is a nurse. Ducking awesome. Hope you don't work in the children's ward, a-hole. Husband came in after that. I waited for a week to confront her about it because I thought that what she did was so shameless that she would surely feel bad. Nope. I happened to be outside one day watering when she was coming back from wherever. Gave her the stare down. All she could muster was, "Got a problem, idiot? Do something about it," before making her way inside. The revenge turns out that little Miss My Crap Doesn't Stink wanted to be a policewoman in our town. How do I know? They sent a letter to people on our street to get their opinion before accepting her into their program. Just a standard questionnaire asking about our dear neighbor friend. Do you have an opinion on why or why not your neighbor would not make a good officer of the law? Why, yes. Yes, I do. I wrote a ducking essay, you guys, complete with photos of her lovely patio covered in cans and bottles from the night before. Their dogs having to sit outside in the pouring rain all day. I guess animal control is too busy around here for that. How do you feel about someone on your force that makes fun of kids with handicaps? Who could possibly show up to work drunk? I sent it back and just forgot about it. It was petty, yes, but felt so good. I say this because last night I heard her crying to one of her buddies about how she couldn't seem to break into the local police force, which had been the whole reason she had pursued her major in college. She isn't sure what to do now. Now, I am not sure if my letter did it. Maybe it did, maybe it didn't. I am not sure if they tell you why you aren't being considered, other than you are not. In that moment, though, I felt vindicated. Duck you, you soulless idiot. Hope those jokes at my kid's expense were worth it. The next one is a petty revenge story. So this story takes place in the mid-2000s when I was in secondary school, which is basically high school for you Yankee Doodle dandies. I was 13 and going through that awkward stage in life where everything is constantly changing. One thing that was changing was the amount of gas my body created after a particularly long series of curries and chilies that my family made regularly, as they were cheap and easy meals to cook. Plus, despite being as English as Paddington Bear, we loved spicy food. The story takes place during a series of French classes where I had a showdown with a very petty French teacher whom we'll call Mrs. F. She regularly put kids in detention for everything, and while some of it was justified, like talking in class or not doing homework, she decided that because I occasionally farted in class, despite being a half-decent student who was courteous and polite, It was enough to put me in detention if someone smelled it and made a fuss. I tried everything to avoid this woman's wrath, from sitting at the back of the class near an open window to asking my parents if I could have something less likely to cause flatulence. However, despite my efforts, I kept receiving detention without any obvious disciplinary issues. The school wasn't obligated to inform parents why I received detention, and the teacher didn't want to share, I think. For a while I kept it hidden since both of my parents worked until I got home anyway, and I generally thought they couldn't do anything about it. That changed when I was put into after-school detention on my 14th birthday. Now, my parents always made a fuss about my birthdays since it was close to Christmas, and they knew I liked having a day when I could choose anything for dinner and do whatever I wanted all night long. This detention was scheduled to last for 2 hours, so there was no way I would be getting home before my mom and dad, and they were furious when they found out that I had been losing break times, lunch times, and hours of my home life to this woman's insanity in her efforts to get me to stop farting. My dad, who was home after my mom every day, asked my brother where my mom and I were, as my mother had come to get me after calling the school to find out I was in after-school detention. She had planned to take us all out for a paid reservation at an Italian restaurant since my favorite food is and always has been lasagna. While my dad was frantically trying to change the reservation or get the money back to no avail, my mom was picking me up. When she found out that my dad had failed to get the money back or change the time, she wasn't happy. However, she was furious when she found out everything about why I was in detention and how much time I had spent in it. Keep in mind that until this point, I had disguised my after-school detentions as extra work for school projects, so I was regularly just given bus money and told it was fine. This time, though, I thought I'd try getting my French teacher to be nice since it was my birthday, but there was no chance. The following day, after my birthday, my mom took the day off work, and I was called into the school office to have a sit-down with my French teacher and the headmistress. My mom let me speak first, and I innocently asked my mom if I was trying not to disturb anyone, but sometimes it just happens. The headmistress asked Mrs. F what compelled her to think that flatulence in class was worth so much punishment, to which she replied that I needed to learn to control myself. My mom then went on about how much money the family had spent getting me home from school because I couldn't take the 3 o'clock bus that my bus pass covered. They had to spend close to £15 a week to get me home. She also mentioned the cost of her workday that she had to take off and the reservation they lost on my birthday. Then she did something I didn't see coming. She pulled out a pile of bus tickets, receipts, and a pay stub from work to demonstrate the costs she had incurred, and she asked, "So is the school paying me for all this, or are you? Because I'm holding both responsible for the cost." In total, between the bus tickets, lost reservation, and pay for the day, it was about £250. Mrs. F then boldly stated, "I'll discipline your child until he learns that he will not disturb the class with his disgusting body." I shrunk a little at this statement, but then my headmistress said something I'll never forget. She said, "Don't worry about these costs. Mrs. F will be paying for them in full out of her pocket before you leave today if she wants to keep her job. It's clear to me that your child is not being a bad kid, just a little bit gassy. Mrs. F, if you wish to put any child in detention from now on, I'll be reviewing it before approving the detention, as it is clear that you are abusing your power as a teacher. Now pay this lady her money and get back to work." With that, Mrs. F was fuming and agreed to pay my mother out of her paycheck. The school office handed the money over to my mother, who proceeded to spend it on extra Christmas presents for me and my older brother that year. Oh, and as for my mom's petty revenge, she told me to sit in front of Mrs. F's desk and regularly fed me anything that would make me pass gas, leaving her unable to punish me again. The next one is an entitled people story. My husband's youngest brother, Jim, recently married in June to his girlfriend of 6 years, Kathy. They had a long engagement of 2 years because there was a 6-year gap, and my in-laws were worried about Kathy's lack of maturity. I have been with my husband, Tim, for 14 years. We have 2 kids, a 13-year-old boy and a 9-year-old girl. Both kids love Kathy and Jim. Once they got engaged, I offered to help with whatever they needed for the wedding out of kindness. I was thinking more along the lines of helping with DIY projects, etc. Since Kathy and Jim had a low budget for the wedding, I thought maybe my husband and I could give them something really nice for their house. She and my mother-in-law called me in May and asked for my son, daughter, and husband to be in the wedding party. No big deal, except they had to wear a specific color. I was irritated because getting this color from David's Bridal was going to be expensive. Thankfully, I found a flower girl's dress from Amazon that was almost the same color. The ties were exclusive to DB, so we paid an extra $30 to get them in 5 weeks. During the call, she also mentioned that my husband and I should pay for their honeymoon since we could easily afford it, and we wouldn't have to get them another gift. Naturally, I asked, "Where do you plan on going for your honeymoon?" She said Sandals Resorts. I had heard of these resorts, seen the commercials, and knew in my gut that it was going to be very expensive. So I asked her how much a Sandals resort would cost. She said $5,600. She went on about how much it would cement their union, how Jim needed a break from work, and again, how we could afford it. I had an out-of-body experience. I laughed like a hyena, hysterically, while she remained silent on the phone. Realizing she was serious, I told her absolutely not. We would not be funding her entire honeymoon. Heck, my hubby and I never had a honeymoon like that. She proceeded to cry and said I was going to ruin her vision for her wedding, that I didn't care about her, and then hung up. I told my husband later to call his brother and ask him what the hell was going on. He just said Kathy was planning everything, so he didn't know what was happening. The day before the wedding was a nightmare as well. On the day of the wedding, my kids ended up getting chiggers from being out in the random woods. She yelled at those who didn't contribute to her honeymoon fund, and her kid sister ate 26 out of the 45 cupcakes for the reception. And to top it all off, her photographer lost her wedding photos. The next one is an entitled parent story. So back in high school, one of my closest friends got pregnant and gave birth to the sweetest baby boy. She stopped going to school for a while to take care of her kid, but still did online school so she could graduate with her class. One thing we would do is go to one of the local food places near the high school on Fridays, and today we decided to go to this nice Chinese place that I frequent regularly, and the little old Asian lady knows me by name. This Chinese place has a sticker on the front door that says something like, "Breastfeeding will always be allowed," which is great since that's what my friend is more comfortable doing for her baby. After we ordered our food and hung out in this little waiting area, the baby gets all fussy. She takes out the little cover and covers her baby and her chest as she starts to feed him. We keep talking until this woman and her son, who had to be around 10, come in. I recognize the kid as one of the kids I looked after when I used to volunteer at a youth center. He comes up to me and starts talking to me, and then asks my friend what she's doing with the baby. Before my friend could answer, the boy's mother cuts in. "A disgusting thing is what she's doing. Don't you know better than to do that in public? And why are you even doing that if you're only a kid?" My friend has an attitude sometimes, so I try to jump in before she would start to throw things. It's not illegal, and Mrs. L is fine with it. She has a sticker on the door. Mrs. L being the little old Asian lady by the counter who was just ogling the baby a second ago. She smiles at us and continues to write some stuff down. The mother wasn't happy about this and continues with her BS. "I'm sorry, but I'm just not okay with a baby breastfeeding another baby. Can you please just stop?" she says in frustration. Mrs. L finally cuts in, and in her broken English she says, "Nursing a baby is a beautiful thing. You have a problem, you leave." She then taps the order on the window that leads to the kitchen and apologizes to my friend for the woman's nasty behavior. She then looks at the boy who is still next to me and says jokingly, "Your mother, she dummy, right?" This makes the boy laugh, and the mother just grumbles in her seat, trying to stay as far from us as she could. When my friend finished and we grabbed our food, Mrs. L threw in an extra order of eggs rolled, since they were my friend's favorite. Everything was fine until Monday came, and I saw the boy again. He pulls me off to the side and tells me that his mom said she doesn't like me or my friend. I just ask him if he still likes me, and he says yes. Yay! Thank you for watching. I would really appreciate it if you could like the video and subscribe to our channel if you haven't already. We'll see you again tomorrow.